You grow up in a small apartment above a noisy night market in Kowloon, where the city never sleeps. The future feels like something you have to steal. At 15, the streets teach you, hustle or disappear. You feel it in the quick calculations behind every smile, knowing time runs out faster than money. You do something dangerous with that knowledge. You draw. Not for likes, not for gallery walls, but to prove what you see can be heavier than the noise. Attrition has faces, mahjong tables, market stalls, mothers working double shifts. In neon-lit alleys, the odds feel engineered against anything soft or slow. Lives narrowed by invisible ceilings. You don't see it as tragedy, but as weather. The air the neighborhood exhales every night. What keeps your story from folding is a way of seeing. You notice everything. A woman negotiating price, a boy carrying trays, the silence of old men. You draw until observation becomes line, and line becomes language. Building a visual grammar to survive and outrun the streets. The city's ceilings press low enough to touch. You make the calls, send portfolios. When someone agrees to a meeting, you show up. They flip through your work, say they'll get back to you. They rarely do. The Hong Kong creative industry in the early 2000s had a template. What you made didn't fit, not because it wasn't strong, but because it felt unfamiliar. The filter wasn't talent. It was risk. You didn't register as low risk to people who never risked what you did daily. 5 meetings in 2 years, no offers. 3 polite rejections, 1 deal demanding most rights. You declined. The calculation was simple. Printing your art book cost 80,000 Hong Kong dollars. Distribution, another 40,000 Hong Kong dollars. You didn't have it. But you found 3 people who believed. They pieced the funding together over slow months. You didn't wait for the gate to open. You built the room behind the wall and began. The book dropped quietly in spring 2008. The mainstream didn't notice, but people from buildings like yours opened it and recognized something. It moved through specific districts, carried by word of mouth, small bookstores, young designers. By month's end, 12,000 copies moved through your network. Within 4 months, the same offices that ignored you were calling. Terms changed, not because you changed, but because you proved a market they couldn't see. That is the only leverage that lasts. Proof of demand that belongs to you. You signed a distribution deal, gaining scale without surrendering originals. This wasn't standard. It required negotiating against decades of experience. The debut finished its first year at over 85,000 copies. Critics called it a document, a precise record of economic and emotional reality. You noted the praise, filed it as data. What you learned wasn't that you were right. You already knew that. What you learned was that the model holds. By the mid-2010s, books and exhibitions moved in larger numbers. The work shifted, collaborators shifted, international presence grew. None of this was accidental. It was the same adjustment learned on the street. Changed the approach without changing the principle. What stayed was the precision of the line. What expanded was the size of the room it could enter. A portion of the early audience saw growth as compromise. You registered the criticism and kept moving. The people who helped lay the foundation don't own the trajectory. That's not disloyalty. That's the logic of anything built to endure. The second major book dropped, selling out its first printing in days. Gallery offers arrived. Brand collaborations followed. a watchmaker, a luxury fashion house, a tech company. They bought proven access to a cultural frequency. You understood this before they finished explaining. You negotiated for equity, ownership stakes, terms treating partnership as investment, not endorsement. Sitting in a fashion collaboration meeting, the realization landed. Art was no longer the main revenue engine. It became the proof of concept. The real conversation was about margin, audience, positioning, and control. Ownership was the goal, not just a fee or percentage. The streetwear-informed fashion line launched in the early 2010s. The aesthetic language of the city's youth had been monetized by brands that never compensated the source. You were among the first to build a structure capturing that value. Within 4 years, the brand generated over 300 million Hong Kong dollars annually. You employed hundreds. The same department stores that once had no slot for your work now fought for shelf space. You sold the fashion brand in 2019. The number changed what was possible. You told them you were stepping away. The announcement in 2017 was framed as retirement from new art books. The industry read it as an ending. You were not ending. You were testing a hypothesis. The hypothesis, leverage as a working artist, erodes with every release. Leverage as someone who walked away at relevance's height compounds. Scarcity becomes strategy. You watched the system manage supply against creators. Now you managed your own. You ran a small publishing imprint, made strategic investments. You began quietly building a new digital platform for independent creators. The premise was simple. Existing platforms were structurally extractive. Creators generated value. Platforms captured most. You intended to own a different kind of platform. The return came in 2022. The new body of work moved with the same quiet force. The hypothesis proved correct. Verified net worth figures appeared years later. The number was treated as the story. It was not the story. The story is what the number represents. 30 years of choosing equity over salary, ownership over access, structure over association, and the invisible cost of holding that line in rooms never designed for someone from your building. Today, somewhere in Kowloon, in a flat not unlike where this began, a 16-year-old with a sketchbook has the same dangerous habit, turning what he sees into something sharper than the environment that made him. He's seen the public version, the numbers, brands, platform, collections. He's seen the result from his angle. He hasn't seen the inside. He doesn't know about years of silence after meetings, or the cost of decisions with no peers. To carry a private life and public architecture that must never fully overlap. To keep walking when the math says stop. He knows the outcome. He's calculating if it's reachable. He doesn't yet understand the hardest part was never the math. He picks up the pen. They always do. The cycle begins.